64 days, 22 hours, 19 minutes, and 5 seconds. In this time, you could watch Breaking Bad 27 times. You could drive from LA to New York and back 19 times. While you're doing that road trip, you can listen to Bohemian Rhapsody 15,820 times. But back in 1958, two guys, Bob Tim and John Cook, decided that they were going to attempt to make the air endurance record. They weren't going to do this by flying around the world. They weren't going to be flying high-speed jets. They were flying a small, single-engine Cessna 172 in circles over the desert for 64 days straight. Meet Bob Tim, former World War II bomber pilot turned slot mechanic at the family-run Hacienda Hotel in Las Vegas. During Tim's time at the Hacienda, he realized there was a problem. The hotel needed publicity. There really weren't many people coming to Vegas at the time, being in the 1950s. Vegas hadn't yet boomed into the metropolis that we know it now. So they had an idea. Well, many people around this time were breaking the flight endurance record, so why wouldn't they give it a shot? So Bob Tim hatched a plan. The plan was to fly longer than anyone had before without touching the ground. The aircraft, 1956 Cessna 172 with just 1,500 hours on the airframe. A trusty bird, but not exactly built for 2 months in the sky. So with a plan in mind and the approval of the owners of the Hacienda, Tim got to work. They gutted the interior, everything but the pilot seat. And in its place, they added a 4-inch pad for sleeping, a small stainless steel sink. They added a retractable platform for mid-air refueling, and crucially, a heavily modified oil system so they could change both oil and the oil filter while flying. See, changing the oil system was so crucial because right when they started modifying the aircraft, they swapped the existing engine out for a 6-cylinder, brand new Continental 145. As one could imagine, aircraft undergo a ton of maintenance, and one of those mandatory checks they go through are engine overhauls. You see, Continental, they recommend about 1,500 hours between their overhauls. So if you're going to fly for more than 1,500 hours, you're going to want to replace the oil every so often. As a pilot myself, I have found that at least with my aircraft, the Cirrus SR20, every 4 to 5 hours, you're going to lose a considerable amount of oil. Now, it's not enough to destroy the engine, but you're still going to have to add oil. So it was important for the pilots to be able to not only access the oil, but to replace it when needed and add more when they get low. So yeah, oil is important. But without gas, the airplane's not even taking off. Over the course of 64 days, you could probably guess the airplane would run out of fuel. So getting fuel became the next problem to tackle. Previous people holding the air endurance records kind of helped pioneer the art of aerial refueling, but it wasn't exactly how you would imagine it today. You see, today, many military aircraft will do this with the help of aerial tankers and long booms and complicated processes. But back in the day, it was just a modified fuel truck going way too fast. In order to space out these refuelings, because driving a fuel truck 100 miles an hour down a desert highway isn't exactly the safest thing, they decided they were also going to add a 92-gallon belly tank to the aircraft and then install fuel pumps to help pump that fuel from the belly tank into the wings for the engine to take it directly. All in all, over the 64 days in the air, they did this 128 times. And I'll put up a few images on screen of what this truck and this whole process looked like because it is terrifying. They ended up having to do this miles away from Las Vegas in a town called Blythe, California. You see, over in Vegas, there's not a whole lot of straight stretches where you can get low and slow in an airplane with a fuel truck going 100 miles an hour, so they had to find a smaller, less populated area to get such a task done. So with the aircraft ready, the plan in place, and all of the infrastructure needed to get it done, they decided they were going to go for it. But of course, as you could probably imagine, this was not exactly a straightforward procedure. They tried 3 times, failing twice, but finally on the 3rd time, they broke the record. But the first time was pivotal. It's what decided who their co-pilot would end up being. You see, up to this point, I told you about Bob Tim, but I haven't told you yet about his co-pilot. But first, let's talk about the first try. That first flight actually lasted 17 days before the engine failed from a burned valve. So what do? Right? We just bought this new Continental engine, brand new, and it's already dead. Well, what do? They reinstalled the original engine, which had already clocked nearly 450 hours. Over the course of that first 17-day trip, Bob realized it would probably be better if I had someone who knew a little bit more about the aircraft itself with me. So, in that time, he hired a co-pilot. His name was John Cook. He was an aircraft mechanic. He was also a pilot. This helped him out quite a bit because he wouldn't have to rely on autopilot. He also wouldn't have to rely on a less experienced pilot. He would have a second man who was competent in the cockpit with him at all times. After recuperating on the ground, getting John Cook up to speed, Cook and Bob decided that it was finally time to make the third and final attempt at their flight on December 4th, 1958. They meet up at Las Vegas's McCarran Field, and they would take to the skies, and they wouldn't see the ground again for 64 days, nearly 2 months. Once in the air, the duo decided that they would have to have some sort of schedule to keep themselves sane. So what they would do is every 4 hours, they would swap over controls. You would fly for 4 hours, you'd rest for 4 hours. All the while staying over airfields at night to avoid terrain in case of emergencies, as the desert is unforgiving for a forced landing at 3 in the morning. During the days, they would keep themselves entertained by looking out the window, reading books, yelling at one another. But as we'll see in the coming moments, this flight did not go without any mishaps. There were plenty of things to keep the guys busy, between aerial refuelings multiple times a day, between changing the oil and oil filters, and I would probably assume a fair amount of bickering back and forth. In fact, I know they weren't bored because at one point, in the middle of the night, both pilots ended up falling asleep for about 1 hour. The only reason they didn't crash into the desert was because of the autopilot, which in 1958 was absurdly basic, and it is quite honestly a miracle that it held up for that long. On day 39 of the trip, tragedy struck. Their generator failed. So at this point, there was no autopilot, there was no lights, and there was no power to spare whatsoever. Thankfully, they did have a wind-driven generator and a hand pump for the fuel, but besides for that, they had to generate their own electricity for the rest of the flight, 39 days in, still with over 20 to go. But by January 3rd, they had already broken the previous record. But they figure at this point, we're here, we're doing fine, we might as well keep going. Because over the last couple of months, even years, there were many people who had broken the record. Finally, on February 2nd, 1959, after 64 days, 150,000 miles, and 128 refuelings, Bob, Tim, and John Cook landed. Their bodies exhausted, their plane barely hanging on, but the record still stands today. And yet 66 years later, the flight of the Hacienda is remembered in the hearts and minds of aviation enthusiasts everywhere. The airplane itself is hanging from the ceiling at the McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas. If you ever get the chance, you should check it out. It is pretty cool. So could this record ever be beaten again? Yeah, it could, but you would need time and a lot of it. Nowadays, most of the air endurance records are broke by solar-powered drones. It kind of feels like the soul of it's been sucked out of it at this point. So is it even worth it? Nah, maybe not. The flight of the Hacienda is probably one of the coolest stories in aviation that I've ever heard. Hey, thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you guys like what you saw, please like, comment, subscribe. If not, leave a dislike. Either way, hope we'll have something out later on in the week. But until I see you guys next time, thanks for stopping by.